Hello and welcome back to Bombs Away, a Minnesota Twins podcast. I'm your host, CJ Baumgartner, and we're breaking down all the latest in the Minnesota Twins, including a trade that happened earlier in the week. Also going over some other stuff, including the reliever breakdown, which we'll finally get to in our off-season position by position breakdown. We had a chance to talk about the starting rotation, and then they traded for Pablo Lopez. So got kind of dated. Maybe we'll go over that quickly, but for now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, or the Kansas City Royal in the room, or former Royal, and that is Michael A. Taylor. He was traded over from the Kansas City Royals to the Minnesota Twins in exchange for Evan Sisk and Steven Cruz. So those two guys, and let's just talk about quickly who the Twins gave up. Evan Sisk is a guy who had a nice year in AAA, thought maybe could have got a crack at the big leagues. He was acquired by the Twins in the J.A. Happ trade, and somehow the Twins were able to turn J.A. Happ's tenure into something positive, at least you hope. Evan Sisk was acquired from the Cardinals in the J.A. Happ trade, and then the Twins flipped him now a couple of years later for the chance at Michael A. Taylor. And then Steven Cruz, I think he's like a 5 or a 6 foot. I got to look that up here, his height. But he's I've been heard by others that it's an intriguing prospect. He's 6'7", 225 pounds, can throw a little heat on the fastball, but when it comes down to it, I mean, if you look at last year in Double-A, he played in 46 games in Wichita last year and had an ERA of 5.5. So, or 5.14. So, developmental guy, probably doesn't really have a lot of stick, kind of just a couple arms you can load into your system if you're Kansas City. Evan Sisk had some upside, I thought, but, never really had the high ceiling of being a lockdown reliever because until proven otherwise, we really don't think of that. And they're relieving prospects in the minors. So unless they're blowing people away, there's just not a ton to get excited about with them. But if you're the Royals, you take a couple extra arms in your system. Michael A. Taylor going to be a free agent after this season, upcoming season. So take a flyer on him. So that's who the Twins gave up. So if you remember, there was a week ago, Dan Hayes was reporting that the Twins were interested in Michael A. Taylor, but the Kansas City Royals wanted Josh Winder, and the Twins basically hung up the phone on him. They basically told him to go take a long walk off a short pier. We are not trading Josh Winder. Falvey made that pretty clear, and it just kind of died down. You thought, oh, well, the Twins swung and missed, whatever. And then all of a sudden a week later, and that's just how fast trades can be, whether a team comes back to the bargaining table or whether another team just changes their offer or what, things just kind of escalate. I mean, you got to imagine that these teams are throwing around trades all the time. They're just calling and say, hey, like hypothetically, like what if we did this for this? Would that ever be something you're interested in? With this for this, whatever. And the Twins were able to make it work by Josh Winder. Look, he's probably going to end up in the bullpen. He was a starter. He was fine. But there wasn't really anything to go, oh, this guy's like a potential ace starting pitcher. But still, he's a starting pitcher with a bunch of team control, somebody who still has a little bit of upside. So there's no way you're trading a starting pitcher for 1 year of a guy who, and we'll get to in a second, is basically going to be your backup center fielder. So there's no way you're trading that. That just didn't make sense for the Twins. The Royals, obviously, you might as well start that in your position. If you're Kansas City, you got what you wanted, a couple relievers in your minor league system, throw some darts at a board. Maybe they'll turn up. Maybe they'll just give you some added depth, whatever. So that's what Kansas City got in this trade. And what the Twins got in the Michael A. Taylor trade was they got Michael A. Taylor, who is a Gold Glove winning center fielder in 2021, spent the last couple of years with the Kansas City Royals. And if you basically want to project, you say, who is Michael A. Taylor? Who is this guy that the Twins got? He's basically Alberto Celestino. That is basically who he is. He's just got a bunch more experience and he can hit a little bit more power. If you look at the Fangraph sliders, like if you go to, the Baseball Savant sliders, if you go to Baseball Savant and you search Celestino and you search Michael A. Taylor, they're pretty much going to say the same things when they look at the chart that's got all the numbers, like exit velocity, speed, all that kind of, and they slide it, red, good, blue, bad, that the gist of it pretty much. And they're basically the same. I mean, there's a few things that are different for each of them, but pretty much they're the same type of player. They're nice fielders, have a lot of upside, have some speed, but also really can't hit the ball consistently. And that's pretty much what the Twins traded for. They traded for a better Gilberto Celestino. Celestino is a intriguing prospect. He's somebody who I think still has potential, but I mean, when you look at what the Twins needed, they needed somebody with experience. Celestino got rushed through the minors in 2021 and really didn't get a chance in 2022 either to get a bunch of at-bats in AAA and develop. He got called up from AA right up to the majors in 2021 and really had to learn on the fly. And he was 21. I mean, he's still 23 years old. There's a lot of big leaguers who aren't going to make their debuts for like 1 or 2 more years. So Celestino got kind of rushed up because of his skill set and the positions he plays. So it gives Celestino some more time to bake in the oven, if you will, kind of mature down in AAA. It's only 1 year. So theoretically, you have Celestino in tow, and then you have Michael A. Taylor, who is here for 1 year. And then next year, then you hope Celestino can take on that role. I would guess if you're Falvey and Levine. But Michael A. Taylor is a guy who brings, this isn't a move that all of a sudden pushes the Twins over the top by like 4 wins. And now all of a sudden, they're projected to win the AL Central. But what it does give them is some much needed depth, because we talked about with Celestino, he really hasn't had time to mature. He really hasn't had time to develop as a big leaguer. And so he was pretty much a liability at the plate who could play a nice center field. And outside of that, the Twins had nobody else to really play center field. Max Kepler, not a center fielder. Larnach, Kirilloff, not center fielders. I mean, Nick Gordon pretty much had to be turned into a center fielder last year. And I know he played a little bit in 2021, I think. But really last year is when he got a bulk of time in center. And, look, Nick Gordon, props to him. I mean, seems like a great dude. He stuck it out. He's done some good stuff, but he's not a center fielder. And the Twins needed a bona fide guy to play one of the most important defensive positions on the field, outside of maybe like shortstop and catcher and all that. And they have a guy who's Buxton light. I mean, if like I've seen, I think somebody equated this to like if Buxton never took the next step as a hitter, and that's pretty much it. He's a guy with a lot of speed, guy can steal some bases, play a nice center field, but hitting just can't quite do it. Now, the thing about Michael A. Taylor is he is a righty, so the Twins finally have another right-handed hitting outfielder to add into the mix. He doesn't hit great against lefties, so it's not all of a sudden, I mean, like the shtick with Kyle Garlick is that he mashes lefties, but against righties, he pretty much just can't do anything. And Michael A. Taylor does a little bit better against righties, but than Garlick would, but against lefties is where he's best at, against left-handed throwing pitchers, but still he's not going to win any awards for his hitting. That's for sure. But what this does give the Twins is that added flexibility, is because now you have a guy for Celestino who's 23 and still needs a lot of time to develop, and you're just not quite sure what you have in him. To Michael A. Taylor, who's a veteran. He spent some time with the Royals. He spent some time in Washington. He won a World Series with the Nationals. So he's got some playoff pedigree. He's been around the league before. He gets to back up Byron Buxton. And that's been something I've been saying with the Twins for years. I think there's been 2 or 3 off seasons now. You see it in the NFL where there's a quarterback like Lamar Jackson, and then his backup is pretty much Lamar Jackson light in Tyler Huntley. He can do a lot of the same stuff Lamar does, just he's like a step below in everything, but basically it's the same type of player, the diet version, if you will, the light version. And that's exactly what the Twins needed to do with Buxton in center field, because you can't put Max Kepler there. You can't put Nick Gordon there consistently. And look, I love Byron Buxton, man. Like I know injuries and all. I will defend this man to the death, but he just hasn't shown a track record to be healthy consistently ever. I mean, so it is what it is. And I've said that before. I've had podcasts on this podcast last April. Go back. I said, Buxton is who he is. You're not going to change Byron Buxton. At this point in his career, he's going to be a guy who, when healthy, is one of the most dominant players in baseball, but he just has never proven to stay consistently healthy. But Byron Buxton is still a guy you want on your team. And the Twins tried to do the load management thing last year. The problem was they never had a good enough guy to put in center field. So now this allows Byron Buxton to slide into that DH for a few games, lets him not have to play center field, and you're replacing one Gold Glove center fielder with another Gold Glove center fielder in Michael A. Taylor. So it's something that definitely is to the Twins' advantage and something that they can use defensively, and they don't have to put Max Kepler out of position. They don't have to take Joey Gallo from the corner outfield spots or first base and throw him into center field. It's a move that just gives them a lot of depth and allows them to play with some things. And it just allows Celestino to cook. It allows Michael A. Taylor to do his thing. He can steal some bases. I think really Byron Buxton could steal bases a bunch. I think they don't because they're afraid of him smashing his pinky into the base. Fair, but especially with the Twins were dead last in stolen bases, I might add, last season in all of baseball. And now with the rule change that with the pitch clock, you get one pick. I think you get like 2 pickoffs. And if you're going to pick off a third straight time, in this pitch clock rule, because the pitch clock will reset to avoid pitchers from just stepping off to reset the clock. Basically, if you tried a third pickoff move, I think it's a third, and you don't get the runner out, it's a balk. So basically, it's going to incentivize teams to get greedy and to try and steal bases, which is what baseball wants. Baseball wants more action on the base paths. And Michael A. Taylor is a guy who you're not afraid to steal a bunch of bases, and still, for being 31 years old, has pretty good speed. So somebody who can be a threat on the base paths, somebody who can be a nice defensive center fielder for the Twins and give them some added value in that spot. And honestly, now with this acquisition, it pretty much sets the Twins 26-man roster, especially for the hitters. You know what hitters they're going to have in tow when they break camp, assuming everybody's healthy, which, if you go on last year's team is a big if, but that's the Michael A. Taylor trade. There's nothing really too complicated about this. Basically, it gives Byron Buxton a true backup who's Byron Buxton light. He can't hit like Byron, but he can field close enough to Byron where he's a true center fielder, somebody you can plug in. Yeah, he's a backup technically, and maybe for Michael A. Taylor, you were going to be a starter in Kansas City. But, I mean, we all know this. Byron Buxton is going to be on the IL. They're going to rest him for 3 days in a row for precautionary measures. Byron Buxton's going to DH a little bit, and it just gives Michael A. Taylor the more time in center field. And also having Michael A. Taylor on your bench, let's say Byron plays in center field and Joey Gallo DHs or Carlos Correa DHs or something like that. Now, if you get to the 8th inning and you need to put a guy on base, Michael A. Taylor is a great guy to pinch run in a situation and give you some speed on the bases, which is something that can help the Twins dramatically, because I'm going to guess, now I have no information, but the Twins were dead last in stolen bases last year. I doubt they're going to be dead last in stolen bases again. I just have a feeling. I could be wrong, but I just feel like that's how things are going to go. Now, granted, you could say it's because Byron was hurt for a little bit and they really didn't trust him to steal, and the Twins didn't exactly have just a ton of burners out there who could steal bases. So maybe that's it, but that's just the way that's just how it happened. I feel like the Twins are going to course correct and not quite be in that spot again next season. And especially if you have a guy like Michael A. Taylor, that's going to help get guys into second base, put them in scoring position, and more importantly, just make it a little more exciting, especially since losing Luis Ariz. We talked about that on the last podcast. Go listen to it. One of our more well listened to podcasts on Bombs Away. So appreciate everybody who's been listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, all that kind of stuff. We really appreciate it. But I think that it needs to be more exciting, because look, as much as it is, and this is a problem with baseball generally, they're doing a great job at trying to be efficient. And how do we make the most efficient baseball team with the most efficient players who can do it, like whatever. And somebody like Theo Epstein with the Cubs admitted this, is that, it does make a more efficient ball club. Sometimes it's just tougher to watch. The 3 true outcomes. It's going to be a walk, a strikeout, or a home run. Like some great highlights, some great players. That's taking away nothing from the players. It's just the style of play a little bit tougher to watch if you don't absolutely love baseball. And it's just a way to create some more positive momentum, create some things happening during a game, along with the pitch clock shaving down games in the minor leagues by half an hour to 40 minutes last season. So I think that should make the Twins a little bit more fun to watch, and would be something that they should just do anyways, because they now have the speed to do it in Taylor, in Buxton. Kirilloff sneaky quick, Larnach sneaky quick for both being corner outfielders / first baseman if you're Larnach. I don't know if I said Nick Gordon can steal some bases. If Celestino comes up, he's certainly a base stealing threat. So there's a few guys around the diamond who can kind of play with as well. Max Kepler doesn't quite have the same speed he did a few years ago. If you look at FanGraphs and his speed rating, he's definitely fallen off, but he's gotten older. So whatever. But I just think the Michael A. Taylor trade is a nice one. And it's really something to show the Twins if they want depth. They learned the hard way last season about not having enough guys. And even the last couple seasons, you just had some key guys get hurt. You didn't really have enough guys in the spot. As we saw in the starting rotation, they're like, we can't have enough starting pitchers. Twins are like, we can't have enough outfielders, and we can't have this is pretty much set. If you want to look at the Twins lineup, and then we'll start to talk about the bullpen here. So we kind of wrap up the Michael A. Taylor trade, because it's, again, backup center fielder. He'll play a lot. It'll give Buxton a nice guy in center field to when he DHs. So Michael A. Taylor is going to get a healthy share of at-bats. He's going to be a productive player for the Twins, but he's pretty much a defensive guy who can maybe hit. He's a bottom of the lineup hitter. You're not going to see him hitting above 7th in the lineup, I don't think. I could be wrong, but that's just kind of my initial assumption here. But if you look at this Twins potential lineup, I'm just going to go around the diamond. This is in no particular order. You look at left field, you maybe say Joey Gallo starts in left field, Byron Buxton in center field, right field at the time being, until proven otherwise, Max Kepler is still on the roster, so you assume he's penciled in as the opening day starter there. Alex Kirilloff at first base, Jorge Polanco at second, Carlos Correa at shortstop, Jose Miranda at third, and then you have Christian Vasquez behind the plate. That's a good lineup. It's got some good players on there. Assuming Joey Gallo has a bounce back season, that's really good. Assuming Alex Kirilloff, there's a lot of what ifs, and that can be for a later podcast, but Kirilloff and Larnach can get healthy. That helps this team a bunch. Jose Miranda taking another step up, or at least staying at the level he was at last season, helps the team a bunch. Vasquez is a nice little hitting catcher as well. Byron Buxton's Byron Buxton. Max Kepler, who knows how the shift does. I don't think the shift will impact his game that much, but still a guy who can do some things for you if he can have a little bit of a bounce back season. And then Carlos Correa, who I think is going to have a bounce. He had a nice season. He had a really strong September when it didn't really matter, but I think Carlos Correa, now knowing his financial security is taken care of, and just being able to go out and play baseball and be motivated on his contract, should definitely help him want to come out and play well. So this Twins lineup can hit, because then you look at their backups. Again, Kyle Farmer is your opening day shortstop. Yuck. Kyle Farmer is your utility infielder. Nice. That's nice. You can use that. Same thing with Nick Gordon. Nick Gordon has to start for a considerable amount of time. Yuck. Nick Gordon is a utility guy who can kind of fill in here and there and get a healthy amount of at-bats. Sure. Michael A. Taylor, opening day center fielder. Fine, but not going to really move the needle for you. Now as a backup center fielder, really nice addition for this Twins team. So if you look at and Ryan Jeffers, starting catcher, proved he can't quite handle that workload yet to be an everyday catcher. Twins really don't like to have an everyday catcher anyways. They like to split it 60-40, kind of ride the hot hand throughout the course of a season, kind of deal with catching. And Ryan Jeffers, a guy who is good off the bench and a guy that can help you out. So I think if I got that right, you got the 9 guys in the field, and then you add it with Nick Gordon, Michael A. Taylor, Ryan Jeffers, and who's the other guy Kyle Farmer. You have all those guys. That's probably your 4 guys off the bench. So you got 13 hitters and 13 pitchers somewhere in there. Maybe I'm off a little bit on my numbers, but that's a nice Twins set of bats. They're not the Houston Astros, but it's competitive, especially if everybody plays up to potential. This team can be very, very competitive if Larnach and Kirilloff play to potential. Miranda takes another step up, all that kind of stuff. So a really nice move for the Twins to be able to get Michael A. Taylor. It's not one that's going to grab headlines, but it's a nice one just to add some extra depth to this team, give Byron Buxton a true backup center fielder who plays a lot like Byron Buxton, and the Twins can use that to their advantage and help give Buxton those off days and let him DH and do all that kind of stuff. And the fielding quality doesn't necessarily take a huge drop off, which is always the thing with Byron Buxton is he's an elite center fielder. Why take him off the field for Nick Gordon? Is that really helping your team? Yes, to keep Byron healthy, but is that going to help you in the moment in that one game if Nick Gordon can't quite catch a fly ball because it's just hit a little bit too deep into the gap? Now you have Michael A. Taylor who can patrol around there and make that catch, or at least be in the right position and know center field. It comes naturally to him, all that kind of stuff. So nice move for the Twins. Overall, they're set. I think you really don't see too much of a change in the Twins opening day roster unless Matt Wallner just absolutely destroys the ball in spring training, and maybe Trevor Larnach gets hurt through camp, or Alex Kirilloff just isn't quite ready yet. There's a couple of things that could still shake out with the Twins, but that's pretty much how it is. Brooks Lee, Austin Martin having a really great camp, but I don't see them even doing that unless they really have to come up and play a lot. I don't see them getting called up to sit the bench. Probably want them to still cook in the minors and get a lot of playing time and develop. So that's how the Twins opening day lineup shakes out, or at least opening day roster. And we'll get to some more of the pitchers in 1 second, because it looks like that rotation again. Now with the addition of Pablo Lopez, you have Sonny Gray, you have Joe Ryan, you have Kenta Maeda, and blanking on the other one. You have Ryan, Maeda, Gray, Lopez, Maeda. There you go. There's the 5. So that's going to be the 5. Twins don't really want to do a 5-man rotation, but could, depending on how things shake out. But the bullpen is something I wanted to get to and I wanted to talk about. And let's just finish up the podcast by doing that so we can talk a little bit about this thing that I've been hyping up for like 3 weeks, because there was a little bit of Carlos Correa steam and just kind of recapping the Twins offseason. Then it completely changed on its head when we talked about Carlos Correa coming back. Then we talked about the Twins adding with Correa. Then we talked about the Arise for Lopez trade. I mean, there's just been so much going on that, haven't had a ton of time to just go over that. And even now we had the Michael A. Taylor trade, which took up the first half of this podcast. So there's just a lot going on with the Twins, which is fun because it's the middle of January and I am super excited for baseball. Pitchers and catchers report to Fort Myers in a handful of weeks. There's the World Baseball Classic coming up. Just a lot to be excited about. I'm ready for baseball. It's the late January. It's about this time of year. Football is on its way winding down, or at least there's only a couple more games a week kind of deal. Basketball, I get kind of like the novelty of like that being back wears off. So I like kind of wait until the playoffs to really care about that. Baseball, it's Twins time, baby. Like I'm ready for the Minnesota Twins to get playing baseball again. So it's been great for off-season content to be able to push us through kind of the dog days of winter, if you will, and get us excited for the summertime and Twins baseball and all that coming up pretty quick here. So, as we go through these positions, and now especially now that we have a better idea of who the Twins are going to have in the major leagues, we'll go through some of the position players and kind of who the Twins have, who's coming up. Could there be any changes? If you look at a guy like Austin Martin or Brooks Lee, Royce Lewis, how do those guys shake out? So we'll talk all about each position by position as the off season continues and as we get closer to spring training, and could even be something we talk about as the Twins get into games in Fort Myers. But right now, let's talk a little bit about the bullpen. So the Twins needed relief help, and I talked about this earlier before they had Pablo Lopez and before the Twins really kind of reshaped this rotation. Is piggybacking starters, is that a thing? Because look, the Twins have this stigma last year, and they earned it, of not taking players deep into ball games. And yes, Dylan Bundy and Chris Archer, maybe you could combine them and they could pitch 6 total innings towards the end of last season. But they were atrocious, and they didn't get to the 5th inning because they just weren't good enough to get to the 5th inning. Once you got through the second order, once you got to the 3rd time through the order, it was over. And heck, even sometimes just the 2nd time through the order, Bundy and Archer were just washed, and it was just really tough to see. And they overstretched their bullpen, which wasn't good anyways. So look, it wasn't ideal. Do you ride the bullpen too long and then they get wore out and blasted, or do you ride the starting pitcher too long and they get blasted? But it wasn't just Bundy and Archer to an extent. Now they let Gray go a little bit deeper. Gray was battling some injuries, so you could kind of see the Twins' motivation to be like, let's not push him. Let's try and keep him healthy for a playoff run if we can get there. We don't want to wear him out to get to the 7th inning in one game if it means he's got to miss the next 2 starts, kind of a deal. I get the logic. Still wish Gray could have pitched deeper into games. Could be just more me as a fan. Again, trying to make baseball a little bit exciting to get invested in seeing a guy pitch longer into the game and kind of feel invested, seeing how far he can go, all that kind of stuff. But you look at Joe Ryan's no-hitter attempt against Kansas City, where they took him out of the ball game early. And I said it at the time, I get why, but you just got to let him try. The Twins basically were eliminated at that point. They were still technically in it, but for all intents and purposes, they were cooked. Let Joe Ryan get his moment. He didn't quite do that. So as much as some people will say that it was pretty much just Bundy and Archer that got the short leash treatment, it was all of the starters, all for different reasons. For Joe Ryan, it was that he hadn't pitched a full big league season before, and the minor league season isn't as long as the big league season, so it's, hey, let's make sure we don't injure this guy for next year. I get the logic. I get it. But it's not fun to watch, and it didn't matter anyways. They still would lose because their bullpen wasn't good enough to hold it. So that's the Twins. I talked about that with piggybacking starters, and maybe they could do that with some guys from the bullpen. And that still might be a thing early in the season. If you look at a guy like Kenta Maeda, who's coming off Tommy John surgery, do you maybe bring Josh Winder into the bullpen and pair Maeda with Winder, and each of them, maybe Maeda pitches 3 innings and then Winder tries to pitch 3 or 4 or 2, to get you to that 6th inning, and then go from there? Because the Twins bullpen pitching from the 6th inning onward is manageable. Having to pitch from the 5th inning onward, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th innings, it's just too much. And so they got to figure it out that way. But I talked about that in a previous podcast, so go back and listen to those. But for the bullpen, let's just go over who the Twins have and just kind of what that situation looks like. This is in no particular order, just kind of how I went down this list with the bullpen. Looking at the relief pitchers, you have Jorge Lopez, the right-handed thrower. Again, got some nice speed on his arm, relies on a sinker for over half the time. It's good when it's working, doesn't quite get a lot of spin on it, and command, which can mean low whiffs. He's not quite going to generate a ton of swing and miss, but so when the ball gets hit, it gets hit a long way. But again, still a guy who's been able to figure things out and been able to be very, very, very productive and be an all-star last year for the Orioles. And the Twins hope that now a full off season in their system and being more comfortable will help, because they really don't want to use Duran in that closer spot. They love being able to dispatch him in the 6th inning or the 8th inning or whatever, and to use him to kind of put out fires instead of have to reserve him to slam the door. Lopez is a nice guy who the Twins think is good for that role. Needs to control his walks. He had a 10% walk rate in 2022. He'll probably come back to earth a little bit from that all-star season. I mean, he had an ERA of under 2 as a reliever through the first half of the season. That's just not going to happen. It went a little bit up with the Twins, but again, how much is that regression going to be? Is he going to go to having like an ERA of 3? Can live with that? Is he going to go to having an ERA of 5? It's not going to work out for you. Jorge Lopez. I'm going to confuse those guys a lot. Jorge Lopez, again, he's under team control for a few more years. So you're stuck with it. So the Twins are going to have to figure out how to use him. And he's going to, again, if he starts out well, everything goes fine, good. Even if he starts out struggling a little bit, jury's still not out on him. If he has a full season where he struggles, then you might have to cut bait on him, but we'll kind of see how that season goes. Either way, Lopez is pretty much an easy case of like, just how much does this guy regress, if at all? I don't necessarily see him taking like another step to be a more elite closer, but can he just play at the level he did throughout 2022? And I think the Twins will be fine with that, because their main guy is Duran, one of the best relief pitchers in baseball. MLB Network did their top 10 relievers, and of course, he was on there. So that's Duran. He had an elite rookie season, about as good of a rookie season for a bullpen guy as you can have. So naturally, there's a chance to see some regression there and him not be quite as good, especially give teams a full offseason to kind of figure him out. But he's as solid as they come. A full offseason of training for the bullpen, as much as we talk about teams having a full offseason to prepare for him, Duran is a full offseason now to prepare as a bullpen arm and as that firefighter role, because he kind of came in expecting to be a starter. Twins moved him right away to the bullpen, and the Twins made it very clear, Rocco did throughout the end of last season, that they're going to keep Duran in that bullpen role just because he was so good. He's the star of this bullpen. A guy who's close behind him, just in terms of productivity, was Griffin Jax. He had a nice job last season. He'll be rewarded with some more high leverage spots. His slider and fastball, of course, the go-to pitches for Griffin Jax. Can throw them both pitches for above average velocity and spin, which has really helped him out. And him being in the bullpen and him being able to kind of maximize his throwing in small doses instead of having to extend it over 5 innings like he did as a starter in 2021. That transition was something that really helped him go from a below average starter to an above average bullpen arm. Bullpen arms are weird, but still Griffin Jax had a very nice season. Baseball Savant gave him just a really solid rating in last year. His 2022 weighted ERA was slightly lower than his actual ERA, which just goes to show you that, he's doing well. Compared to weighted ERA, just weighs it with the rest of baseball. So again, somebody who's had a really good clip, nice FIP. He's a guy who didn't overperform. He's just a guy who played nice in a role. So again, there could be some regression there. Give him another full season. Bullpen guys are weird, but a really nice development for the Twins in 2022 as they try and rebuild the bullpen to get it back to the elite levels it was in 2019 and 2020. Jorge Alcala is a guy that they hope to be in the mix, I'm sure. He's got the high upside. He was a guy that they got him in the Ryan Presley trade from Houston. He's a guy that they really hoped for, but has had to battle some injuries the last couple seasons. He throws for a lot of heat, a lot of spin, but when he's hit hard. There's a lot of high exit velocity. He's a fastball and slider guy. The Twins love fastballs and sliders. If you haven't picked this up by now, you got to watch the injury concerns because he hasn't really pitched since August of 2021. He had triceps and a right elbow injury through the last couple of years. I love Jorge Alcala. I still see a lot of high upside in him. I want him to be a part of this bullpen mix. It's just got to happen. I think he's effective when he pitches, but I think he needs to be more reliable and more dependable and to get in that mix because he made a few appearances last season, but again, was hurt by the end of April and never played for the rest of the season. Setback after setback. Maybe a new head trainer helps with that, but Jorge Alcala, somebody who needs to be healthy, but when healthy, I think can be a very productive piece for this Twins bullpen. Something that the Twins are relying on a lot with a few guys as we go down the list. He who shall not be named, Emilio Pagan, is still here. You want to hope it's more of a depth signing. I mean, we all know the story. Gave up a bunch of home runs. Don't even bother bringing him in the game if you're playing the Guardians, all that kind of stuff. He blew lead after lead, even in April and May when he was getting some high leverage spots at the end of games. He would get the outs, but would look really shaky. And you could just kind of see it. Some people are like, well, I mean, he's getting the hitters out. Like, he'll figure it out as the season goes on. There's the other camp who's saying he's struggling in April. Like, what if he doesn't? And he just keeps getting hit hard. And he just kept getting hit hard again and again and again. Gave up a lot of home runs. Couldn't locate his pitches. So, again, Pagan, I don't know why he's still around. I don't know if Falvey has something to prove with the Taylor Rogers trade with keeping him and Paddock, who Paddock is fine. Extending him is fine. But Pagan really felt like a guy who just shouldn't have came back, but he's here. And again, if the Twins bullpen plays up to potential, it's an if, but you probably don't need Emilio Pagan, but he's just kind of there. See what you can do, whatever. Caleb Thielbar, like the only lefty that the Twins really have in this bullpen, the old crafty vet. I mean, had another great season, one of the most effective relievers on the Twins in baseball. And just really nice. He's a guy who, again, doesn't throw a ton of heat, but just able to locate his pitches, get outs when he needs to. He's the only reliable lefty the Twins have in the bullpen. So, I mean, he's just got that job security until somebody comes to overtake him. I'm a big Caleb Thielbar guy, so good to have him in the bullpen. Nice little spot, and that's how this shakes out for Ronnie Henriquez. He was he's a right-hander. He was acquired in the Garver trade with Texas. He was a starter, put into the bullpen. He had a 2.31 ERA in 11 MLB innings, but a 3.79 FIP. He had an ERA of 5 in AAA, but again, starting pitcher, so it inflates a little bit because you're giving up more runs because you're pitching more innings. Probably starts the season in AAA, has the fastball, slider, changeup, kind of the 3 main pitches that Ronnie Henriquez rolls with. Somebody who will get more opportunities in the majors this season because of, there's going to be guys who go on the IL. There's going to be guys who struggle. There's going to be guys who just naturally earn a spot for a few days. So we'll probably see Ronnie Henriquez throughout the season, but again, the guy who's got the fastball, slider, changeup kind of in the mix. Still has got a couple steps to take, but is major league ready, or at least ready for an opportunity. Trevor McGill, another righty, fastball, slider, changeup, high velo. His fastball averages 98 miles an hour. High strikeouts. Needs to watch for the home runs. He has 1.5 home runs per 9 in AAA. Something that McGill need to clean up a little bit, but again, another bullpen guy with potential. Somebody the Twins will kind of cycle through over the course of the season. So another name to watch out for there. Cole Sands. Again, another one of those starters. The Twins moved him to the bullpen halfway through the year. Didn't like him as a starter at all. Just didn't really have any confidence in him at all after watching his first start and then a second start. Just nothing. But out of the bullpen, I thought he was effective. I thought him piggybacking Chris Archer was a nice combo. I wrote about it for Zone Coverage about halfway through last season, saying the Twins should just kind of keep rolling with that as much as they can. They didn't really. I think Cole Sands got hurt or something like that. I can't quite remember. Like Sands as a long reliever more than a starter, somebody who can piggyback maybe a Kenta Maeda or somewhere along those lines. He's got the fastball, the curveball, the splitter. Again, he's got to watch the home run ball as well. Might just attribute it to him being a young pitcher. Need to see more development as a starter, but I think he's pretty much destined for the bullpen. Just when you look at how much depth the Twins have at starting pitching and that he didn't prove himself last year, basically says that this guy is going to be a reliever. Could be in that unique role of a piggybacker, but till now, just a reliever. A couple other lefties on this list. There's Giovanni Moran, flashed some nice upside from a southpaw with a 2.21 ERA and a 1.78 FIP. That's fielding, independent pitching. Basically, kind of a metric of if you have a nice FIP but a high ERA, it means you're pitching better than the run production is showing, and kind of vice versa. Kind of tells you if you're pitching a little over your head, but not for Moran. He had some nice moments. He didn't get a ton of high leverage innings, but was good in those situations. Could be a very high strikeout guy when he's right. I think Moran is, if the Twins had it their way, like takes another step. Maybe not this year, but maybe the year after, supplants Thielbar as that go-to lefty in the bullpen. Now, the Twins only have one lefty in Thielbar, so Moran definitely feels like a guy who can be in that mix. Danny Colomby is a guy who, just a guy. I mean, he was with the Twins a little bit last year with the Dodgers. Then the Twins just claimed him off waivers. He had a 1.46 ERA, only 12 innings, though, for the Twins. Had a 3.8 FIP. So needs more body of work to really see that balance out. If the Twins need another left-handed reliever, he's there. I mean, if he was a righty, there's no way the Twins would take a flyer on him. But the fact of him being a left-handed thrower helps a lot. He's on a minor league contract with an invite to spring training. So again, that's where the Twins stand in terms of a lot of their bullpen guys. Now, if I did my math right, the Twins have 13 guys in the field, and then they have 13 hitters. And then they have 5 starting pitchers. That gets them to 18. So they need 8 guys out of the bullpen, roughly. Again, this is just kind of me spitballing. This isn't like mock opening day roster 1.0 or whatever. Jorge Lopez makes it. Duran makes it. Griffin Jacks makes it. Assuming injuries, Jorge Alcala makes it. Caleb Thielbar makes it. That's 5. I think Emilio Pagan breaks camp out of spring unless somebody performs really well. That's 6. And then it's kind of a toss-up from there. Maybe McGill gets a shot. Maybe Henriquez gets a shot. Maybe Moran gets that shot. You could also throw a guy like Josh Winder in the mix. Cole Sands gets thrown in that mix. They have a few of those bullpen arms, kind of those starters who aren't quite going to be starters, but like they're still, technically a starting pitcher, but they'll throw him in the bullpen because they don't want to sit him in AAA. That could be something. Maybe you see a Josh Winder type with the piggyback innings, as we talked about with maybe Maeda or something like that being an option they could use. But more time will tell. And as we get closer to spring training, I don't have any pulse on the Twins, so this is just me spitballing here. But if the Twins are going to keep that short leash principle, it doesn't hurt them to not have a Danny Columby and instead have a Bailey Ober or a Josh Winder or Cole Sands. I think Bailey Ober probably should stay in AAA because he needs more time to pitch and stretch out his arm as a starter and go do that down in AAA. Because ideally you want Ober in your starting rotation at some point this season. You could live without Josh Winder making an appearance to start a game and have him just be a long reliever or a piggybacker or somebody like that who you can rely on. So maybe that's who you save those final couple spots for. You look at guys like Duran, Jax, Thielbar, they're all locks on this team. Additions, people have thrown around Michael Fulmer because he was on the team last year. I think the Twins should bring him back. I think a flyer, like a 1-year deal, would be very nice, but the Twins probably want a 1-year deal. And if you're Michael Fulmer, you probably want to see if there's a multi-year deal out there for you somewhere, maybe a 1-year deal with the team option or the 2-year deal, 3-year deal. I don't know. Michael Fulmer's probably not going to get that. But as spring training gets closer, he's going to get desperate and have to sign with the team eventually. And the Twins can offer him, say like, hey man, you were with us last year, so there's comfortability, a full season. We're expected to be pretty good. You'll get some high leverage innings. That would, again, add another, it was like the Michael A. Taylor. It doesn't necessarily take you from an average bullpen to an elite bullpen, but it does just give you that little bit more depth that you can definitely work with and use, and pushes everybody down a spot, which means everybody below him down a spot, which helps in terms of depth and just putting guys in roles where they're best fit to succeed. So that's what I think about the relievers. Finally got a chance to touch on that, and just where the Twins are going to go in that direction. It's my general feeling. I can't say I'm quite confident in how things are going to shake out because, as we've learned, Falvey and Levine can wheel and deal at any moment. And all of a sudden, somebody who we thought was a lock to make the roster is gone. Somebody who we expected to be traded is still here, like Max Kepler. There's still some dominoes to fall and some things that could change. But for the moment, I don't foresee the Twins making any major moves. Maybe they bring Fulmer back. Maybe they trade for somebody, maybe they trade for another reliever, maybe I don't even know who you can really trade for at this point outside of maybe adding to the bullpen, which is the one area that they've looked at the least over this offseason. But that's where things stand right now with the Twins. And I think this is a good point to wrap it up and just be done for the night so I can sit on the couch and get ready for bed. This has been the Bombs Away podcast. I'm your host, CJ Baumgartner. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Give us the 5-star rating, all that good stuff. Go follow the Bombs Away YouTube channel as well. Give that a like and a subscribe. And we'll see you guys next time. And we can finally start breaking down some of these position players, unless, of course, the Twins want to make another big trade, in which case we'll cover that too